everybody. It's so good to see you. My name is Elsa Jeanette Rios. Everybody calls me Belle. Um, I work for a company called CAMI. We work with educational programs for computers that U.S. students can use. But prior to that, I was a ninth grade teacher. So I taught students that were about 14, 15 years old, and we learned geography. That's what I taught for 15 years. So I'm really happy to be here. I live in Far, Texas. So if you guys look at your map and you look at the border of Texas, right where Mexico is, you'll see a small town called McAllen. That is where I live, and I'm really happy to be here with you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, good evening, sweetie. How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you. My name is Soumyasri, an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. I'm so glad to interact with you. I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, of course. Go right ahead.
Tell me a little information about Texas. Is Texas famous for the cotton industries?
So we are a little bit famous for our cotton industry, but the two industries that we are more famously known for is oil. So we have a lot of petroleum underneath our ground. And the other thing that we are very famous for is our cattle ranches. We have a lot of them here in the state of Texas. Some of them are milk and dairy farms where we have milk and dairy cows, and others are used for the selling of beef. But we do have a little bit of cotton, but more than cotton, we do oil and cattle.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, good evening, sweetie. How are you?
Fine, ma'am. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking.
My name is Madhavi. I am an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. I am so glad to interact with you. Namaste from India. Here I would like to take it an opportunity to ask you a question. Here my
Of
question is, what is the school day like in Texas?
So it's a little bit different. It's our schools are divided by age group. So our primary schools are going to have students that can start as young as 3 years old, and they go up to 10 years old. So that would be our kindies all the way to fifth grade. And they tend to stay in one classroom the whole day. Their teacher will teach them all their subjects, which are math, reading, science, social studies, and then they do get to have their fun classes, which would be art, PE, sports, or band. So for those, they do go get to see another teacher, but usually our primary students stay in one class. The teacher decides we're going to do 1 hour of math, 1 hour of science, 1 hour of social studies. When you get to the intermediate and the secondary, which are your 13, 14, 15-year-olds and higher, they have different teachers for every class. So they would go to 8 different classes in one day. Each class can be anywhere from 45 minutes to 50 minutes. So we usually start at 8 a.m. and finish by 4 p.m. in the afternoon. They do have breakfast and lunch provided to them during the day. So that's also included. And our school days go from August, usually end of August, and we go for 10 months all the way up to the end of May.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering to my question.
You are so welcome, sweetie. Thank you for that.
So, well, here is our classroom. You can see my classroom. It's depicted with a lot of cultural pictures. Each picture has its prominence.
It's a beautiful classroom.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Good evening, sweetie. I'm doing well, love. How are you?
I am fine, ma'am. Thank you. My name is Ritika, an educator from Z.P.H.S School, Ilavaram. I am so privileged to interact with you. Namaste from India. I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, you can, sweetie. Go right ahead.
Please share your experience as a social studies teacher.
Okay, so I started teaching when I was 20. I graduated from the university. I started teaching ninth grade, which is students that are about 14 and 15 years old. And I started teaching world geography. And I really do love teaching. Um, the school where I taught at, they were considered to be low income. So that means that they did not have a lot of money. And because we were so close to the Mexican border, a lot of my students were recent immigrants from Mexico. So a lot of them had never traveled beyond our little city. And when I was teaching world geography, we learned all about the world. We learned all about the different continents, all the different countries. So being able to show my students places that they might never get to visit was really cool, especially when we would go on VR trips. I don't know if you guys have ever done virtual field trips. So you get some like really cool VR glasses. They could be from Google. They're really cheap, and we would use a program called Nearpod, and would show them virtual tourist sites. Like we visited the pyramids of Giza in Egypt, and then we would go to the Colosseum in Rome and the Great Wall of China. So they got to see all these different places that maybe because of money or other situations, they might not have had that opportunity. So, them learning new cultures, learning about different foods that people are eating, seeing how other students go to school, how sometimes it's a bit different. Because even though Texas is so close to Mexico, Mexican schools are very different. In Mexico, students can choose if they want to go to school in the morning or in the afternoon. They don't have to go all day. So that was a very big change for the students that were coming from Mexico. Um, Being able to teach the different cultures, the different languages, the different religions, it was always a lot of fun because this was information that they didn't know. So just like you guys are learning about the U.S., you're learning about Texas, you're getting to see this opportunity that maybe um, because of different situations, you might not be able to. So, being a teacher is really great because you know that your students are going to learn things and they're going to experience things that they may not have an opportunity to.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering to my question.
So,
You're welcome.
yeah, well, I happened to visit USA in way back in 2022. In that year, I visited the Arkansas State University as a part of Fulbright Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program. So, where I witnessed some Mexican immigrants because Arkansas is close to the Mexican border also. As per my
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I happened to see so many Mexican immigrants, and I happened to taste the Mexican cuisine also.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because I always, wherever I travel, because I do have the opportunity to travel with the company that I work for. And I love seeing how different countries do Mexican food. And it's really similar because we all have the same basics. So everybody has rice and beans and either some sort of protein, whether that's meat or chicken. And it's just what spices you add that's a little bit different. So I just love seeing how everybody does Mexican food.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening. I'm so honored to meet you. This is Joshna, an ex student from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I would like to ask you a question. May I ask, ma'am?
Yes, you may.
What kind of technology do you use to teach? While Geography. Why geography?
Oh, perfect. So we really didn't start using technology until like 2018. So, like 5 years ago, right before COVID hit, we really started using Chromebooks. And it started off where every teacher had a Chromebook cart and the students got to use them in the classroom. They couldn't take them home. They had to use them there. We used a lot of Google Classroom. So the students would get their assignments inside of Google Classroom. They could answer, turn it in. So we really did not use a lot of paper and pencil. We used a lot of fun products, um, like Cami, which is a company I work for. We use things like Edpuzzle and Nearpod. So these are great tools that are a lot of fun to use, but they're also very educational. As the years kind of went by and then COVID hit, all of our students, through funding from the government and from school, we all got to have a device. So all of our students got to have a Chromebook that they got at the beginning of the year, and then they got to keep it all the way through the end of the school year. They would return it and then get it right back when they came back to school in August. So we did a lot of Google Classroom, Nearpod, Cami, Puzzle, Air Deck. So there's a lot of really cool programs out there for students, that takes them a little bit beyond the classroom, a little bit beyond their textbooks. We started to incorporate the virtual reality headsets, especially when we wanted to take those virtual trips. So we were very lucky in the sense that when COVID hit, a lot of money came into the schools. And so all of our students got to have Chromebooks. And to this day, most schools in the US, their students will all have some sort of um, Chromebook, whether that's a Chromebook, an iPad, or a laptop.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, sweetie. How are
How
you?
are you? I am fine, thank you. My name is Hemasri, an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. I am so proud to interact with you. Namaste from India.
Namaste.
Here I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, you may, sweetie. Go right ahead.
Are teachers paid well in your country?
So, as you guys know, in the US, we have 50 states. Every state decides how they pay their teachers. So if you have guys ever go on Google, you can put teacher salary for Texas. So Texas is a state that pays their teachers really, really well, especially after COVID. So to give you an idea, if you are going to be a brand new teacher in Texas, your salary would be about 50,000 US dollars a year. In some states, like in New York, that number is higher, but in other states like Arizona, it might be a little bit lower. But overall, teachers are paid very well in the state of Texas.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
My name is Jessica, an 8th grader from Z.P.H School, Ilavaram. I am so excited to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, you may, sweetie. Go right
Could you
ahead.
please tell us about your work as a success teacher champion?
Okay, so now what I do with Cami is I teach teachers. So I used to teach students, but Cami, the company that I work for, they sell a program that students can use on their computer. So whenever one of our salesperson sells Cami, what I have to do is I go to the teachers and I show them how to use Cami in their classroom. We show them how to create lessons with Cami. We show them how they can use it with Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or Schoology or just by sharing it through a link. It's a really fun job. I have been able to go to many different countries because I get to teach teachers from all over the world, not just in the United States. And because I was a former teacher, that was one of the qualifications in order for me to get my job.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering to my question.
You are so welcome, sweetie.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, sweetie. How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
I am doing well, thank you.
My name is Gayatri, and I graduated from U.S.A. High School, Ilavaram. I'm so jubilant to interact with you. Here, I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Yes, you can.
Do you study Indian geography in your textbooks?
We did. So when I taught geography, the way it was set up is we would go by the different continents. So when we would get to the continent of Asia, we would look at the specific different countries. And when we talked about India, some of the things that we would talk about was population density, how many people live in an area, and population distribution, which is where is it exactly that they live. We talked about the different religions and the different languages and the different cultures that are found in India. And we talked and dove into a little bit about the food because I always wanted to show my students how, even though we are many miles and kilometers apart, we do have common similarities. So yes, we did learn a lot about the culture and also the history of India, from English colonization to independence. So they were very much aware of where India was. And sometimes they even got to see different videos showing them a day in the life in India.
Thanks, ma'am, for answering to my question.
You're welcome.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, sweetie. How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you. This is Nandakishore, and I am from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Now, I'd like to ask you a question. Here is
Of
my question.
course.
Are teachers respected in public schools in the U.S.A?
Um, that's a tough question. Um, when COVID hit, many parents saw the importance of teachers because when COVID hit, all our students went home. They weren't allowed to come to schools, and we had to do all our teaching virtual the way that I'm interacting with you guys right now. So we gained a lot of respect during that period. From then on, everybody understands that being a teacher is a difficult job. They understand that we are educating the future leaders of tomorrow. Um, in my 15 years of teaching, some of my students, when they graduated, some have now become lawyers, some work in the medical field, some became teachers. So, because we do guide students towards their future, trying to make them productive members of society, teachers are very much respected in the US.
Kind of training sessions are held for teachers to upscale their professional knowledge.
Okay, what kind of trainings do we get? So, this is a really fun question because it really depends on what the teacher needs. So, as a social studies teacher, I went to a lot of trainings that involved um, how to be respectful of other cultures, especially because a lot of the times we were teaching about cultures that we were not familiar with. So we would go to trainings very much like what you guys are doing right now, just to learn about other cultures so that we could go back and take it to our students. We learn some of the trainings that we get are trainings that are called social emotional learning. So when you're 14 and 15 years old, students are going through a lot of different changes. So as teachers, we were trained and taught how to work with students when, sometimes you're going through your first heartbreak, or, you're trying to, you have your first crush, or you're having problems at home. So not only are teachers trained in their content, like me with geography and social studies, but we are also trained on how to help students if they are going through difficult situations.
Clearly.
How innovatively do we teach the topic of world geography our student?
How innovatively do we teach it? Okay. Well, first of all, one of the things that we as teachers learn is geography does change from year to year. So one of the things that innovatively as teachers we have to do is we have to keep up with the times. So in 2012, I think you guys were way too young to remember, but in Africa, the country Sudan had a civil war. And in 2012, they decided to form a brand new country called South Sudan. So we have to constantly be learning what is going on in the world. And we do this using technology. Wikipedia is a great source. Google is a great source. National Geographic is a great source. So we're constantly having to keep up with the times because we know that if the government changes in a country, that could change the culture of a country. So it's always just trying to keep up with what's new, what's going on, and what changes are being made throughout the world.
Different countries across the globe as a part of the tour along with your students. So, have you ever visited India?
Have I ever visited India?
Yeah.
I have not. It is not one of the countries that has yet to be on my list for work, but I would absolutely love to visit India. I hear it's a beautiful country with really good food.
Mhm. So, are there any students, especially the Indian origin, in your class?
I did not have Indian students just because we were more close to the Mexican border. But now that I'm working with Cami and I work with teachers all over, I do see that we do have a good population of Indian immigrants in our Northeast area. So states like New York, New Jersey have a very big population of new to the country Indian students.
Okay. So here is an interesting question. Of course, once I worked as a social studies teacher before I entered into this profession of English. So I used to teach map pointing to the students strictly. So I used to draw the outline map of the world, outline map of India, and I used to ask my students to locate the different cities, different places. So, what kind of qualities do you think should a social studies teacher possess in order to make the students good at the locations? I mean, the geography as well as some important things.
Okay. So I think one of the best qualities that a teacher needs to have is you have to understand the students that you're teaching. So my students usually came from a more, um, they came from a poor background. They didn't really travel much. Most of them had immigrated to the United States without their parents. So knowing who your students are, knowing what their background is, knowing what is it that they know, because sometimes you will be surprised to know that your students may know more than you do. And that's a great quality because they can then teach you about what they know about that specific country that they could be learning. Um, Another great quality is just be able to change with the times. So in the 15 years that I taught, when we first started, I had an overhead projector. I don't know if you guys know what an overhead projector is or if
Yeah,
you've
we
ever
have.
seen one.
We have here. We have
Oh
here.
my goodness. So I started teaching when those were like modern technology. And then we moved to projectors that we would connect to our computer. And then we moved to smart boards that we could write on. And then we moved to the Chromebooks and doing Google Meets and Zoom. So being able to make those changes and adapt to the new technology is another great quality. And the teacher themselves always wanting to learn because sometimes we think, oh, we're old, we're teachers, we know everything. But in reality, always wanting to be a student yourself and learning new tips and tricks is always a great quality to have because you would be surprised that our students sometimes know more when it comes to technology than we as the teacher.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And here is my last question. So Indian food is famous. Indian cuisine is famous. So many tourists they like to eat. They like to taste the Indian cuisine. When I went to U.S.A, some of my friends came to see me at my hotel, and they took me to Indian restaurants where we ate up the Indian cuisine, and they like it so much. They like the Indian spiciness. So, have
Yes,
you ever tasted the Indian spicy food?
I have. And let me tell you a really funny story. So, the company that I work for, Cami, is based in New Zealand. So, New Zealand food compared to Mexican food, because I am Mexican, does not have a lot of flavor. So we were there for 2 weeks, and by the end of the first week, I was starving because I would eat the food, but it never had flavor. And I was about to have like a breakdown because I was like, I'm so hungry. And we just happened to be walking down a street, and I smelled something so delicious, and it ended up being an Indian restaurant. So we had goat curry, naan bread, um, chicken katsu curry, and I almost cried because it was the most delicious thing that I had ever tasted. And I just loved breaking apart the naan bread and just scooping up the goat and the chicken curry. And it was so delicious because it has so much flavor.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, in the restaurant, I went there for 2, 3 times. But Indian authenticity is missing. Actually, I found that Indian authenticity is
Yes.
missing in 1 or 2 curries. But if you want to taste the Indian authentic curries, you need to visit India. That's the only way you can taste the Indian delicacies.
I I hope to visit India one day. I hope to make it into Indian because like I said, we work with schools all over the world. So I would love the opportunity to visit, and that would probably be the first thing I do. I'm going to go look for a nice little restaurant, sit down and just have very good curry.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, and we
Of
thoroughly
course.
enjoyed your session. So before we wind up this session, could you please give your final message to my students?
Of course, I would love to. So, guys, please never stop dreaming. Never stop believing in yourselves. In today's world, you can literally work from anywhere. So, I work remotely from home, but here I am in your classroom in India. So, please know that the world is literally at your fingertips. And it's all about finding what it is that you love to do. So if you were like me when I was your age and you're like, hey, I think I really like teaching, go for it. Or if you are like, no, I think I like medicine, go for it. Never let anything stand in your way because at the end of the day, the choices that you make, you're going to have to live with them. And so try to make the best choices that you can and try to make the choices in life that are going to make you happy. Because if you can find a job, a career path that makes you happy, you will never feel like you're working a day in your life.